Yeah, exactly. Hey, welcome everyone. I'm Steve Taylor, the host of the Rocket MSP Podcast. Today I'm joined by Dave Sobel. Dave, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for letting me come on and rant and rave for a little while. These are always fun.
Absolutely. I love having conversations with you. So I just want to dive right in. People should know who you are by now. Uh, we're going to keep this one to an hour, guys, because we all have stuff to do. This
We
was
actually have stuff
kind
to
of
do. See, but you always assume people assume you say that they know who I am. I never assume they do. I'm a dude in my basement, so I never assume that
yeah.
people know who I am.
That's all they need to know. You're just a dude.
I'm just some dude in my basement. So I mean, the quick version. I was an MSP for a decade. An MSP for a decade. I never overblow my own experience on that. A moderately successful regional MSP. Learned a lot, did a ton of lecturing and speaking, was involved in CompTIA, helped grow communities. I did a ton of stuff as an MSP. Then I sold that, and I moved over to the vendor side, and I led channel programs for vendors you've heard of, like Level Platforms, GFI, Logic Now, SolarWinds. Those are all companies that I work for. It was, from my perspective, 2 jobs over 8 years. Of course, I had 4 company names over that time.
Yeah, but you started it. You were at Level Platforms, and then you were like, "Wow, this platform sucks." In my words, not yours. And then you were like, "I'm going to go to GFI," and then they just kept getting sold. It was like a Reddit.
Well, we rebrand. I mean, the quick story on that is first off, at Level Platforms, I loved what I do, and then we sold the company. Like, that was the exit event, and then I left. Right, so it was, I hit my goals, right, to get the company to sell. And then I went over to GFI. We rebranded in order to get acquired, like, as part of the process, and then SolarWinds acquired us, and then I went on the IPO journey. I stayed a year post IPO to learn that process. And so now what I do is I went independent, and I said I wanted to actually really advocate truly independently for IT services companies, MSPs, whatever we want to call ourselves. I like IT services companies as the branding, and I wanted to do that independently. So I set up a little media company. It's called MSP Radio. My flagship show is The Business of Tech, which is a daily 5-minute news and commentary podcast on all the platforms. That, I always sort of say, like, you're getting 5 minutes of news plus segments of why do you care, to give it some perspective. That's available on all the podcatchers. And then weekly now, starting for this year, I launched it as a video show. So for those people that prefer it on YouTube, you can catch the podcast in its video form. Comes out on Fridays. So you can watch it as a single show, or you can listen on the go on audio. However you like to consume your content, that's the intention of The Business of Tech.
Guys, it's worth it. Listen or watch his show. It's solid material. I wouldn't bother getting in the news because he already does such a good job of it.
Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate that.
No need. So I have it's like a silly question, but it's also kind of serious, and it's just an easy one. Is managed workplace still even a thing?
It is. So AVG bought Level Platforms. AVG was bought by Avast. Avast sold the technology to Barracuda. It is currently the basis of Barracuda's MSP offering.
Oh. So has it changed much?
I cannot speak definitively on that. I have moved so far away from product. I don't care much about products anymore. One of my things is that there are so many people that are so good at that, for exactly the same reason that you said, I don't do news, Dave, because you do news. I go, there are so many people that are so much better at product analysis now that I'm looking at trends and basic capabilities to try and understand strategy, to understand placement. I can build out a basic stack, but from where I sit, they're all fine. Right? Like, I just look and go, like, it's fine. I don't think you're going to mess up buying just about any of these products.
That's fair. All right. So let's dive into what I really want to talk about. We're going to talk about some cybersecurity stuff today, guys. And this is, I titled this A Tough Conversation Every MSP Needs to Hear. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. We all, MSPs need to wake up. Okay. So let's get into it. So President Biden signed this wonderful new executive order, long overdue, and he basically changed the rules a bit, if you will, when it comes to cybersecurity. And I've got a nice little bulleted list here of what I believe is basically everything that this is saying. And this
Yep.
list is courteous of ADEA. And this list says the federal government will move to a zero trust model and will deploy cybersecurity best practices and tools such as secure cloud services, MFA, and encryption. Barriers to information sharing between the private and public sector will be removed, and IT service providers will be required to report any breach information that could impact the nation's networks. To ensure a secure supply chain for businesses and government, an Energy Star-like rating will be established to help businesses identify and source software developed with a priority placed security and transparency.
Yep.
Priority placed on security and transparency. A standard incident response playbook will be developed by NIST for the federal government and its agencies, and will be provided to the private sector businesses to use as a template. My assumption is that would be up on the NIST website. Any one of us could download that and start using it as a template, even for all of our clients.
That's exactly the idea. Just like they've been publishing guidance now, there's the UK's National Cybersecurity Center. Like each government has their own bit. So what's interesting about this, and I love talking about this. So people always like, I've been in the commercial space my entire career, right? Like I've only ever done commercial work. But I always observe, like when we get into this Fed stuff, I actually laugh and go like, hey, everybody, I actually live just outside Washington, D.C., right? And locally, I'm something of a unicorn in that it's really rare to find somebody that lives here that does not do federal government IT consulting. In fact, most of my buddies who came out, I went to college with and stuff, like, are all work for feds or federal contracting. So this is actually an area where, like, I don't have personal experience, but over beers, this is completely a world that I understand and explore. And I've had some really interesting conversations with them. And because for those of us that live in the commercial sector, we often forget the government as customer, right? All of like our communities, if you're in mind, like when we talk about MSPs, like we're all generally talking about people that serve generally small commercial customers. We might be serving local government, or school or something like that, but we don't think about the Fed, right? We don't think about serving the State Department or the Commerce Department or Justice or something like that. Well, those are big, valuable contracts, and there's big companies that generally support them. There's also little companies that support the big companies, whole ecosystem. But as a customer, the government can actually use its buying power to impose rules. And that's what the executive order is doing, is the president is now saying, look, I'm essentially CEO of the company that is the federal government. We buy a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm setting forth the rules for the way those contracts are going to get done. And I can do that because I'm the chief executive officer of this thing called the U.S. government. I run it if you put it in perspective of thinking of like a business, that's what he can do, right? He's in charge of all the agencies that set up buying. And so what he's just done is he said, look, Fed, this is the rules that we're going to do to buy. And the benefit of our work is that we're going to give it to the community, right? We're going to give it out via NIST, the same way that there's the NIST cybersecurity framework, all of the resources that you can use there. These efforts, we're going to give it out via NIST. It's considered a big deal because all of these big federal contractors are now going to have to conform to that. Oh, and by the way, all of the people, the ecosystem supporting that, right, which trickles down into all of the smaller companies and all of the products that they use and everything around it, is all going to have to play by these rules. So the idea is it's a big deal because they're using their spending power to change. Now, will this, what's also interesting is the breach notifications, right? That you will now have to do that if you're doing business with the Fed. Anybody that's been talking to me for a while will see the parallels with what they did down in Louisiana, right? Where dealing with the state and local government, you have to do breach notifications as well in the event that you're breached there. That's where this gets all interesting. And you see it, the big spending power of the Fed now focused on this methodology.
So, I don't like it, Dave, and I think it's just because I don't like being told what to do. But I love what they're doing because this is sorely, sorely needed in this industry. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, this is stuff that like we should just be doing. Why aren't we already doing some of this stuff?
Well, I mean, so this is the interesting thing. It's all about motivation, right? Why are we not doing this stuff? I don't know, because we're not financially motivated to do anything about it. Like I always I like to make the parallel. I like to think about the cyber world and compare it against the physical world. I've been saying for a long time now that let's frame ransomware for what it is. Armed gangs of criminals are breaking into businesses, holding hostages, and demanding ransom. That's what they're doing. Mm-hmm. If this was physical, there would be so much disruption and calls for police action. Like, literally, think about it. If there were gangs of criminals roaming the streets, breaking into small businesses and taking hostages and demanding money, we'd be crying out for law enforcement, for more regulation, for keep us safe. Everybody'd be calling for that, right? Everyone would be calling for that. And I hear the like, well, I don't like being told what to do. Everyone would be calling for solutions to this problem. It's happening right now in the cyber world every single day. And we're just kind of paying for it. Like you think about Colonial Pipeline, right? We all just paid at the pump. That's what the consumer got told. Colonial gets breached, we're paying at the pump. SolarWinds gets breached, the US government pays for the cleanup. Like, that is what is happening. The only piece of what happens here is financial motivation, right? And people are just essentially going, I'd rather just write the check, right? I don't want to do the hard work of preventing or re-engineering or any of that kind of stuff. Insurance will cover it, or I'll just write a check. And particularly big companies flush with cash are just happy to just deal with it, right? They're just absorbing it as part of the business. That's why I think a lot about this from a small business perspective, because in our space, we don't have the deep pockets to protect against those incidents. And I'm watching the pressure build.
Yeah. And just before we get too far into this, guys, we're live right now. It's Thursday at 11 a.m. ish. So if you're watching live, toss some comments into the chat. We're happy to.
Oh, yeah, please.
Questions, comments, whatever you guys want, we'll engage with you. So I agree, and here's the thing that's the most frustrating is MSPs. I don't feel like they're keeping up. There's a lot of MSPs that probably should never have started an MSP to begin with. There's a lot of guys, we call them pizza techs and trunk slammers and whatever mean name you want to give them. Like, they're the guys that they've got a PC repair shop. They've got a really great presence there. And now they're trying to get into like business stuff because they see the money that can be made when you get that monthly recurring revenue, but they have no idea how to actually perform that right. business or enterprise grade security.
I'm going to say this intentionally pointedly because I want to make the point is you don't like being told what to do. No one told them that they can't do that business.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally legal, totally allowed. There's no regulation. Now, last I checked, no one can set up a doctor's office, right, without some actual certification. I can't set up a law firm without some certification. There are spaces that don't allow this, right? But that requires regulation. That requires government intervention at some level to say we don't allow that. In IT, we've said, we don't want to be told what to do. We're all going to just do our own thing. And so we have a free-for-all that anybody can do this. Anybody can hang out. There are no requirements. There are no certifications. And ultimately, there aren't actually that there are not intense penalties for failure on this, right? Like, now I want to separate out cyber crime, right, which has some penalties, to the way we're enforcing failure of the basics, right? Like there are certain law. I mean, we do have certain laws in place that allow for that. And this is where I think that the pressure is rising. But to your statement, like anybody can go do that stuff, right? It requires the bar to to raise to change the ecosystem. Now, I see the signs of pressure outside of our industry that are going to cause intense pressure on the IT services space, but the IT services space itself, it just hasn't cared enough to do anything about this.
Well, I mean, the space as a whole, absolutely. I know there are many MSPs. I'm going to say many because, there's still hundreds or thousands of them, but there's still tens of thousands of MSPs that don't. There are many MSPs that are doing like proper cybersecurity practices. And by the way, I'm echoing through your mic. So there are plenty that are doing things right. They care. They're looking up the appropriate articles and just continuing education, buying more services. But the most important thing is they're configuring these things and they're learning how to configure them so that way they're configured correctly.
And over time, by the way, and over time. So because I really do, and you made a great point here, and I want to reinforce it because I'm not down on the industry. I love this industry. I think there's massive opportunity here, right? Like I think a good IT services company can kill it. Like I think this is a really awesome space. You've highlighted the important bit. The important bit of security is the services piece, and the services piece done over time, right? Security is a risk mitigation activity that is done with services over time. That's the key. There are great players in this space that are doing I talk to these guys. I love their methodology. I love their discipline, but they know it's hard, right? That every single day they got to get up. They got to stay on top of this game. They've got to continually check. They've got to be vigilant. They have to enforce policy, procedure, human investment. And it's an ongoing effort, right? It's not, I'm going to buy some product off the shelf. I'm going to deliver some piece of software and my problems go away. They know that the discipline is what the value is. And that's what they're selling, right? We're good at this. Love that. Where I go is we've got another group that just goes, well, I'll just buy some products, right? Or I'll throw it, like I just if I figure out the best antivirus or the best backup or the best new gen security thing, I will solve this problem. And it's like, you are missing the boat.
So I agree. And I would say that, all right, so the way that security really should be handled and structured for an MSP, and I'm drastically simplifying this, is like, all these products have like updates, they've got security updates, product enhancements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we as MSPs should be evaluating every update before we push it out. The security ones I'd say are pretty high priority.
Oh, actually, so Steve, I'm going to go on record as disagreeing with you here. And I'm going to say you're starting in the wrong place. So let me highlight something again, and quick plug. I covered this on my show. Everybody, you should be listening.
Go for it.
The UK Cybersecurity Center has just recently come out with they just did a Cyber Week event, right? They were doing a virtual event. One of the experts there came out and said, "Oh, you should just turn on automatic patching. You shouldn't evaluate that stuff. You should just turn it on automatically."
But doesn't this stuff break?
No. His statement was like a decade ago it used to break. Now they don't break. Okay. Like,
so what you're saying is the guys that are trying to do this, they're doing it based on information like from 10 years ago, and they haven't stayed up with the game.
Right. And actually this was the point I made on my show, right? Was the fact that like, if one of your values is, we're going to go evaluate all of these security patches, the UK's National Cybersecurity Center has just said that is not a valuable choice. You are not adding value to the chain. In fact, you are slowing the chain down. They literally just took out one of the tenets of managed services. We're going to evaluate your patching. No, what they're saying is turn on automatic patching for everything. just turn it on. Like, get those patches out as fast and as often as possible, because they're pretty reliable. Patching is a pretty reliable process. We're pretty good at this. And so, but what I'll also push back is you started with product. This isn't about product. We all know the biggest thing is people, right? And I'm gonna snicker and go, I could have solved Colonial Pipeline's problem. You know what we could do? Not have those systems on the internet. Like, maybe we should take a moment and look and go, a critical pipeline infrastructure, are we actually getting enough value out of putting it on the internet? Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe that's something that might actually require a human to go there and work on it, because it is so critically important. Now, there might be a business reason to not make that decision, right? But start with the why. Start with the implementation. These are all services discussions, right? This is all about the why of what we're going to do. And then if you elect to put the system on the internet, which, by the way, I expect most people will decide there's enough value in putting it on the internet, you're going to then say, how do I, through process and procedure, enforce that this won't be a problem over time? Microsoft had a new stat out. 99.9% of all the compromises that they are tracking are because of a lack of two-factor authentication.
I saw another stat the other day that blew my mind, and I believe it was either 93 or 97% of all Microsoft 365 accounts do not have 2FA.
Right. And I'm going to laugh and go, like, how many of us as good geeks, all right, here's my YubiKey, right?
Right.
Here's my YubiKey. This is how I work.
I don't need one of those.
This is how I work with my systems, right? Like, and we were laughing because we caught up earlier this week, right? And you were saying how paranoid you think I am, right? And I'm totally paranoid. I have like 5 backups on my production systems. Like, it goes to 5 different backup sources. And I use YubiKeys on everything. And my wife bemoans two-factor authentication on every system that we have. And you know what I constantly tell her? I said, well, you saw Colonial Pipeline? That doesn't happen in our house. It doesn't happen here. Now, I know I'm totally now a target, and I'm like, and if the Russians are coming for me, I am screwed, right? They are way smarter than I am. But I can handle most scenarios in the event because I just actually have the people stuff I've invested heavily in. I bemoan all the time. I'm watching these forums where MSPs are saying, oh, I can't get my customers to do 2FA. And then they take them on anyway. What they've just done is they've accepted the risk, right? And this is where I made a prediction back in December. I did 4 prediction episodes in December. And one of my predictions is that people in the IT services space, somebody in the IT services space is going to get charged with criminal negligence. What is criminal negligence, might you ask?
I hope so.
Right. Criminal negligence, quote, refers to conduct in which a person ignores a known or obvious risk or disregards the life and safety of others. Federal and state courts describe this behavior as a form of recklessness where the person acts significantly differently than an ordinary person under similar circumstances.
Now, hold on a second. An ordinary person.
Right.
Now hold on a second, because we just said that there are many MSPs out there that are doing things right. Right. But I believe there are significantly many more that aren't.
Do they know that they are doing it wrong? And that's where this is where criminal negligence comes in, right? The idea is if you are a professional in that particular field and you have the basic understanding of those, would you act in the way that person did? And I believe the answer now is it is so well established in the IT field that if you're in IT, there are certain basics that you have to do. I don't know. We call them best practices, right? We talk about it all the frickin' time. We are all constantly talking about the best practices. This information is publicly available. The guidance is published, right? We could go to NIST. We can see the exact guidance. And if you are an ordinary person in delivering this space, would you deliver that way? And if a client can prove that you should have known the way this is, and you should have acted that way, that is criminal negligence. And I think somebody's going to get pursued on this. And by the way, we're seeing all the signs of it, right? I've reported on cases where MSPs are being sued by their customers for breach of contract for promising things like, I will take care of all your IT needs. I will take care of all your IT needs. Well, implied in that is that I have a basic understanding of all your IT needs, and the guidance is pretty clear. And this is where I talk about the pressure, right? I see the pressure in the IT services space coming in. A big company has a big pile of cash to defend against customers that are coming after them. They just do, right? Like they just have that ability to absorb that blow. But a small company doesn't. And this is where I'm starting to say, like, I feel this pressure coming, and even a good performing MSP may be in a position where they're having to defend themselves against this kind of stuff because of the chaos in our industry.
But I don't really think we need to worry about that, because that's what insurance is for.
Well, funny thing about that, the insurance companies are getting wise. So just recently, let me get the name of the head of of a Swiss insurer, right, came out on stage and he talked about this space, the insurance space, cannot support the ransomware payments that are being placed on that industry. That it is so explosive in terms of the payouts in the insurance space that the insurance space is not capitalized enough to cover it. So we, the IT industry, are an existential threat to the insurance companies. Now, I don't believe they're going to take that laying down, right? Like I don't think they're going to just let us abuse them and keep using them to pay off our mistakes. They're going to push back. And governments are also figuring this out. In France, the government has actually banned payouts, and the insurance company AXA has come out and said that in France they're not going to pay out ransoms anymore. That they're going to respond to a request from the French government. A request, not a full ban, but the French government requested that they stop paying that, and AXA is going to do it. They're saying to their French customers, we're not paying anymore. Now, I always look to Europe for some of the lead on this kind of stuff, because the Europeans are very privacy focused. They're very personal responsibility focused in this space. You can see the leads of the trends in Europe far more than you can see them in the US. We can see that because they're not getting many of the benefits of kind of big tech in the same way that we are in the US. They're just getting a lot of the downside. So we can see the trends play out over there. And we can see that the pushback's already starting. And you think these insurance companies are just going to let you pay, you milk them forever? They're in the business of making money too.
So talk to me about cyber insurance, because, I see that many companies still don't have it. Many companies still don't understand it. And now, well, if they're not going to pay my ransom, what the hell do I need it for? Is going to be the new approach.
Well, look,
so
there are smart guys that deal in insurance. I'm just looking at it from, as a, in a way, we're kind of consumers of that. So you're right. Look, if you don't have insurance, you're just bearing the risk yourself, right? You're just completely bearing the risk of, if something happens, I am on the hook financially for that. That is what insurance buys you. It is a risk reduction tool. The insurance companies, this is why they're getting smart, right? They're asking better questions about insuring IT services companies, because they don't want the open-ended, complete exposure of cleaning up for a mistake. So this is all just risk transference, right? Like, this is where the risk for something happening goes. The insurance companies have figured out that there are some basic things they can start getting smart about. If they ask good questions and they start looking, and by the way, they jack up the rates too. That's another way of doing it, is if you're not doing the stuff that they want you to do, they can just charge you more to try and offset their risk. This is all risk transference. So the question, insurance is just about, I am offsetting my risk of something happening by purchasing this financial vehicle to cover me for it. That's what it is. You're right. You don't have to have it. You're just assuming a lot more risk in the event something happens. Now, you may offset that risk through I don't know, intense investment in your service offering, right? Like, I am a ninja at this. We are so good. We make everybody have 5 levels of YubiKey encryption, like double secret probate. Like, you can go to a certain level. I could engineer this to the point where I don't have insurance, or I just have a bank of my own money, right? Like, I've saved up enough money to cover and absorb what that issue is. These are all just business decisions. But what I'm looking at is saying is the insurance company is know that they can't leave things the way they are because they can't pay out at the rates they're being asked to pay.
Absolutely. So, you said something about, we're ninjas, we're going to get these products and yada, yada, yada. So I think, that's the mindset. We touched on this earlier, but the mindset is, let's go sign up for Secret Double Octopus, or let's sign up for, let's do YubiKeys or Duo or whatever, right?
Right.
And all I have to do is implement this, and I'm done. Like, here, customer, you've now got Duo. But the problem that I'm seeing is that we can talk about products all day long, and I think products can be a big piece of the answer. But
they're required. That you have to. I mean, you have to have the technology to do this. I'm not dismissive of the products, but what I'm saying is, unless you're doing the policy and the enforcement of implementation, it doesn't matter.
And I think that I'm not saying you need to become an expert at that product to like the ridiculous degree, but we can't just like, hey, I bought this thing yesterday, I'm going to deploy it to all of my clients today. And I mean, it probably won't screw anything up, right?
Well, but let's put that back in the risk transference statement, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is all risk management. This space is risk. Security is risk management. Customer hires us to offset the risk, right? They know they have a security risk. They hire us as IT professionals to offset that risk. That's the way this goes. We employ insurance to offset our own risk, right? Like that's part of the math. We also leverage our expertise, like in our policies and our procedures. That also offsets the risk. And your goal is to minimize that risk. This is where products get interesting to me is they assume no risk transfer through their acquisition. There is no vendor that I'm truly aware of in security. I'd love to hear if I'm wrong. I'd love to hear of somebody doing it this way. But if I go buy any of these technologies, none of them assume a lick of risk for the customers on their deployment. They don't back it up with a money back guarantee that if something happens, they're going to pay my security coverage or they're going to pay for an incident. They're not doing that. They're not assuming any of the risk transference. Now, that's a business decision, totally legit.
Sure.
But we need to be open about that.
To be fair, though, would it have been such a bad thing if it were set up correctly? I mean, like, all these people setting up, I don't know, like Orion all over the world, like, they all just had it set up wrong, right? And that's how SolarWinds Orion got hacked.
Sure. Well, no, not in that case, right? Because in that particular case, it's a supply chain breach, right? So the breach happened to the vendor, right? But where's the risk live, right? The risk live, like we theoretically have to figure out where the risk lives in this. Does it live in the IT services company? Well, I could make an argument. If I was the IT services company, I'm going to go, look, I bought this product under the assumption it was built with, proper security in mind, because that's the way it was positioned to me and that they would manage the security of their code. Well, turns out that wasn't true. We can get into then potentially the consequences of how that works and what is the motivations to make sure that supply chain is protected. Well, we have to examine that too.
Yeah, but I mean, they obviously, SolarWinds learned from their mistake from doing that. They have a new security guy. They've got a new CEO. Like they they got rid of all the people that were responsible for things. Obviously,
they did not. So admittedly, so let's be very clear, right? So obviously the CEO Kevin Thompson was already anticipating his departure at the beginning of it would have been announced prior to the announcement of the hack. That was something that he was already doing, and he'd already intended to leave the organization. Where you're going with this is the obvious statement is so in 2020 the board of directors at SolarWinds elected to pay all of the executives in 2020 their full executive bonuses. This after the company itself estimated that the cleanup internally cost about $21 million. All the execs themselves personally walked away with their full compensation. That's the statement of the way SolarWinds' board believes the responsibility works for the way that all fell out.
Well, I mean, it wasn't the board's fault.
Well, clearly, there was no everyone was rewarded fully for their personal involvement in the operations of that organization. That's the statement that the board made: is that you did everything that we intended for you to do. So
yeah, that sounds right.
Yep, there we go. Sounds right, doesn't it? Like it I mean, and so I legitimately asked the question, did anybody there pay a price? Did they learn to change behavior based on their choices? And I mean, I think that's a legitimate question, right? Like, so the company absorbed $21 million in losses. They theoretically passed that on to shareholders, right? Certainly the US government absorbed a significant amount of financial losses. So in this case, the customer, right, absorbs significant financial losses. But what did the company's message say? Well, you did exactly what we asked you to do.
Yeah. Well, they did. I mean, they how many golf retreats and nights in Hawaii and Bahamas did they go on? I mean, that's what an executive does.
Well, Steve, but I want to be super fair. How an individual spends their compensation is entirely their choice, right? So like I'm not gonna criticize. I'm not anti-capitalist. I'm in the business of making money. I'm in the business.
But I'm not talking about an individual's compensation. Like, don't these guys, like, they just have SolarWinds pay for them to, all the executives are going to the Bahamas this month, or whatever.
But I think that's a red herring, right? I think that's a red herring. I think it's much more important for us to say, does the system that we've set up of compensation reward or indicate the correct kind of behaviors that we want to have happen? And if we want better, if we believe truly that security is an issue, then we should tie performance compensation to those actions. If we don't do that, we should not be surprised when security doesn't happen. And I would be remiss if I didn't observe all of the security products make money off being sold to people that want to buy to have more security, but they're not actually assuming the risk. This is why I worry about IT services companies. IT services companies are the ones absorbing that risk, right? I would say this is an extreme example because it's easy to pick on them, but I don't think that they're special as a vendor, for example, in this space. None of them are standing up and betting their personal reputations, their personal finances on IT services companies being successful with their products. They're not actually linked to that, right? And so IT services companies need to be thinking about this, right, in terms of what risk they are absorbing and how they're managing it, right? That's the bit that I'm super focused on. I'm just observing that the way the system is doing, they're all making money off selling the promise with no actual accountability on the delivery. The accountability on the delivery comes to the IT services company. Oh, you're muted there, Steve.
I'm good for it once every episode. All right.
It's guaranteed,
so just
right?
because, yeah, guaranteed. Just because I'm nosy and like knowing numbers. So to the top 6 executives, SolarWinds paid more than $65 million in compensation. And I assume that includes the bonuses and everything.
Yep.
Okay. So 65 million, and then 25 million in expenses related to the hack
Yep.
that we know of.
That we know of, that they've reported. This is from their S1s, of course. Like, you know.
So we're shy of $100 million. Now, if you had to guess, because I'm not going to Google everything right now, but if you had to guess, what is SolarWinds' annual revenue?
Oh, well, it's available in the S1s, right? So I think so in the S1, I think that they're around 700 million or something like that right now. And
Okay.
I don't have that off the top of my head, but it's
That's
available
fine.
in the S1s. They're a publicly traded
Yes.
company. You can go check all of that kind of stuff.
And that's why I said I just don't care to Google it right now because I know it's
Yeah.
available. So a seventh of their revenue went to mitigating the hack and the top 6 executives at SolarWinds. And because of that, if I had to guess, I would say that the way that they're going to make up for some of this stuff is they're going to pass that down to the customers. They're going to
Oh, I don't
say,
know.
you
They
know what?
passed that on to the U.S. government. Like let's absorb the cleanup efforts, right? The cleanup efforts by their customers is where I'm actually more interested in the damages. Like let's focus on, again, if I'm spend all my time trying to figure out how do we worry about IT services companies, right? We can go down the rabbit hole of that kind of stuff. I'm not in the business of making those guys money, right? They are perfectly capable of doing it themselves and have clearly done a great job. What I'm in the business of doing is making sure that we think about this from an IT services company perspective, particularly small ones, because I'm concerned about the levels of vulnerability in this risk, the risk that they're taking on. And that's the bit that I want to worry about. The incentive structure right now pushes the cost downstream. It pushes it, if we're using SolarWinds, where the cost of that failure lies is in the services that those companies now have to go invest in and spend on, and the customers themselves. Right, that's where it falls into, and the risk acquisition. Those in particular for the federal sector, they're just absorbing it in labor and workload and rebuilding. I mean, it's just a massive cost. By the way, we, the taxpayer, will end up having to handle that at some level, right? Because this is our tax dollars at work going to clean this up.
I'm not sure if you heard, Dave, but as of this year, we, the taxpayer, have a lot more responsibility on our shoulders.
Sure, but I also like, and look, I always make this point. I like living in a world where I have clean water to drink and roads to drive on, and like I think I'm not anti-tax. I want to make sure that we get some services for them, right? And I think there's a healthy debate to be had in there. But I also don't want to live in a world where I don't have clean water. Like right. For me, that's where I always start with. This is some basics here. Where I worry is we need to make sure the incentive structure is built in such a way that the pressure is not entirely on the IT services company. And what's happening right now is that it is coming that way, right? The vendors are not absorbing this. They are not responsible for any of the risk that you take on. You're the end of that. Insurance companies are saying, we're not going to take it either. Customers are asking for more risk. Like, the pressure is all hitting into those small IT services companies. And that's where I want to worry about. Like, let's make sure that we're addressing this correctly. I look at this industry and I say, wow, you're taking on so much risk with so much open back end. And many of you are just doing it like crazily. I run around in forums and I literally just look and go, like, seriously, you're taking on customers that will tell you not to do 2FA and you're happy with that? Oh my God, you're going to get so screwed. And it's for Is it for lack of understanding? Is it for lack of confidence in selling? I don't know, but I need to scream going, oh my God, you're taking on so much risk. This is horrific. And if you want help, you should be pushing back on the industry, on regulators, to give them guidance. Because back to my original premise, right? Let's be the customers for a minute. Customers are gangs of criminals are breaking into businesses, holding hostages and taking ransom. It is completely reasonable that customers want something done about this. And as the pressure ratchets up, I mean, it's interesting to me that the ransomware gangs have actually realized that they've over-rotated on exposure, and they've all gone a little bit more dark recently. They've actually stopped promoting their own services. They've backed off a little bit in some of their forms. They're savvy business people. Like, with the exception of it being incredibly illegal, man, it's an awesome business. They've built it up they've got a distribution model. They've got marketing. They release financial statements. They they offer great commissions. Like, there's so much. I get it why that's happening. And it's coming out of some areas of the world where the financial incentives are there for them to invest in crime, right? Like, or it's criminal gangs that are just operating to make money. Most of these ransomware gangs are just printing money. So of course they're doing it.
Yeah, well, and I see right now, yesterday, not right now, but yesterday afternoon, there's an article out that says DarkSide, the guys responsible for Colonial Pipeline, were oddly apologetic that their ransomware caused so much trouble. They got what they wanted. Our goal is to make money and not create problems for society. So,
well, actually, but think about it. Think about their business for a second. And by the way, America's Finest, I'm so with you. I totally want to be like, if we sell services like a drug dealer, first hit is free is awesome. But think about their business model, right? They actually are trying to fly just below law enforcement radar, right? They're trying to be active enough to make money, but not so active that, like, the hammer comes down on them and they get shut down. And in fact, in DarkSide's case, we don't entirely know how they've been shut down, and U.S. law enforcement says it wasn't them, but they were shut down. They flew too close to the sun. This was too high profile, and they got smacked down. And other gangs around them all realized that and lowered their own profile to go quiet for a little while. They're looking for the balance, the risk management. They're looking for exactly the line where they can create their machine that generates money but doesn't quite set off the alarms enough. From my perspective, if we want change, we actually do need to do some investment in the law enforcement front in order to drive this down. We should be advocating for that, but part of that is also going to be the standards of enforcement. We can't cover every incident, right? But we ought to be able to say, like, look, if you're doing this basic stuff, that's the rules of the road. And this is where I get intrigued by the conversations about rules and norms that are happening at the federal government level. That is talking about what countries are going to establish as the rules and norms of the way they're going to enforce. Like, what is going to get dealt with at a military government level? What's nation state attacks and what are crimes? Like, that's the rules and norms discussion. So,
Colonial Pipeline, they paid $4.4 million in ransom.
They did.
Did you know that?
Yeah. I did, and they got a tool that was so slow on decrypting that they had to continue to work from backups in order to bring it all back. It was it's a bit of an amusing tale on the way. Besides the fact that, like, shut down a pipeline, but you have to at least smile on this.
So, like, pumps near you, were you like out of gas?
Well, I got lucked out. I filled up the weekend before, and I read the news, and it said they were specifically saying there is not an actual real gas shortage. This is a perceived gas shortage, which then caused a real gas shortage.
Right. But, I 100% understand. So just in case people aren't aware, here in America, Colonial Pipeline Company, is that a private company or is that a government entity thing? I never know about this stuff.
So it's a private company, right? So Colonial Pipeline is a private company that it's privatized to do the movement of fuel.
Okay, so it got hacked. it ended up shutting down the pipeline. So this pipeline, I believe, goes across the U.S. and it's how we get, fuel, oil, whatever it's taking.
From Texas all the way up through Pennsylvania for distribution of fuel across the East Coast is what it does.
So because that happened, they had to shut it down. And when they shut it down, they just started putting fuel in trucks, in big tankers, and they started driving those across the country to get them up.
Right, way slower, way harder to do, way more expensive, way more regulation. States compensated by lowering the safety standards. By the way, great. That always makes me feel great. But they understood it was an emergency. They lowered safety standards and at some level in order to do transportation. They balanced the amount of time. I assume smart people are working on that. I generally do take the approach that most of the time these are smart people trying to do the right thing. They figured out the balance. That I see the smirk. You got to work from there, or you will completely go crazy.
No, I get it. I don't agree with it, but I get it.
Well, look, and I will do my quick rant on that. I live in the Washington D.C. area. I know a lot of public servants. They are genuinely nice people that are trying to do the right thing. They don't necessarily move. They can't always move fast. There's lots of, but they are not bad people. They're generally always really smart, good people that have, by the way, intentionally chosen to be in a field that pays less to do something right for society. It's a really interesting field for those that are in public service. And I have a lot of respect for public servants. For the same reason I have a lot of respect for teachers. These are people that can get involved for really good reasons and take a lot less pay to do good work. And we should give them the benefit of the doubt and hold them accountable when they fail, right? I think that's a healthy way to approach this. But this is where, I think it's interesting is again, what they did actually was they shut down the pipeline, not because the pipeline was broken, but because they couldn't get any of the metrics to keep it safe. That's why they had to shut down, was that their systems to watch the safety information were no longer there. They couldn't safely run the pipeline in that particular circumstance without the diagnostics. So you're right. They rerouted it. There was going to be enough fuel until consumers heard there was a pipeline problem and there was a rush on gas.
Consumers, I hate to say it, but there are some people that are just idiots. Especially so we saw the cardboard box instead of the gas can, right? You saw the cardboard box.
Yes.
There were bags galore. And then I saw one woman was using a clothes basket. The one that has all the big holes in it.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, I know.
I don't know how much gas she intended to get in there, but
I don't even try. It's don't even try. It will make my head hurt, and I don't even try. And again, I try back to again. I always try and put the lens back on it. My job is to give advice to IT services companies. That's my job, and so we can stray. That stuff's fun, but we want to think about the consequences. This, for me, the consumer was just told we bore the price for those mistakes. Consumers bear the price, and that just feels like a lot of pressure. It feels like consumer pressure on this space is growing slowly over time. You think about the frog in the pot, right? Is all of a sudden it realizes it's boiling. And when are we going to hit that point where there is real business motivation to change? And this is where I get kind of interesting with it. If I was running for any political office right now, my platform would be securing small business by bringing order to this space. And I'm reasonably confident.
Why aren't you running for public office?
Because I like what I'm doing. I like helping IT services companies, right? But if I was a politician, that's a completely great platform to run on, right? It's bipartisan. Everybody loves supporting small businesses. This feels like you can get everybody behind this. And I could run on regulating this stuff and imposing order on technology around the cyber crime stuff. Right. And I could focus on both the criminal side of things, but also the lack of discipline in the industry itself, that the risk it's posing to the American people, to business commerce. There is just such a ripe space for this. And I'm just waiting on somebody to do it. But while I wait, I'm warning this industry. this is why I talk about regulation all the time. It's coming. I can see the pressures from politicians. I can see it from insurance companies. I can see the wall of the vendor side they don't need to accept any risk, but they are happy to keep telling you to go sell security and sell products. And don't get me wrong, I think there's value here. I totally want us to go forth and make money selling security, but I want to make sure that we're doing it in a way where we've not absorbed so much risk that it's crushing to the small IT services company.
So I've got a nice little softball for you here. You said earlier that you know some of these politicians and they're genuinely nice people and they want to help and etc. So I got to ask, and I won't ask who, but like,
Sure.
Are you buddies with anyone like in the House or the Senate or anything like that? Like,
not at that level. But what I do is I listen to a lot of like interviews with some of these people, and I like for example, I admire and look up to Senator Mark Warner from Virginia, and from my own state, from Virginia. He's a tech entrepreneur, founded Nextel, super smart guy on cybersecurity. Listen to his questions and his interviews around cybersecurity. He's one of the ones pushing for disclosure laws, by the way. He's a guy who actually knows this space. He understands these needs. He's thoughtful and insightful on that. Like I listen to his interviews and I look up and go, yeah, there's a guy who gets it, who understands the problem, who's working diligently to do it. You should feel better. He's on the Senate intelligence committees and stuff too. Like, it's a thoughtful, smart politician who's working on this kind of stuff. It's usually the ones that are not getting massive headlines, for what they said recently, are the ones that are the really diligent ones that are actually giving real thought and working on these problems. He was a great interviewer. And I just use him as an example to say there's lots of those. I also know people that are working at these agencies that are smart, thoughtful people working on policy that we want them doing. People at the State Department or people at Commerce, or transportation. Like, they're the things that we need to think that are working on our behalf.
So here's my final question.
Okay.
Bullet points, Dave. What do MSPs need to be doing today in order to be doing it right and doing it successfully and doing right by their customers too?
Okay. So I bemoan the focus on products. God, stop talking about the frickin' products. Everybody debating which product is best and which PSA and RMM. It's all a red herring, all a waste of your time. Your core offering is your service that is managing the risk of technology for your customers. You are managing the risk around their security. You're managing their risk around the way that they invest. You're managing their upside. Ideally, you are managing the way they use technology to be more profitable, to be more, to grow faster, to save money, all of those things. And you want to spend all of your time thinking about your service and how it is best accomplishing those goals, while at the same time minimizing the risk that you are assuming on delivering those services. Spend your time on that. If you're doing that, you're going to be successful because you're focused the correct way. All of the other stuff is distraction. It is meaningless argument that is not driving to that, particularly because in most cases, we are talking about minor percentage points differences in these products' capabilities. We really are. The bigger variable that you've got to manage is really around the risk side of things. You're going to make a much bigger difference in your delivery on managing your own risk than debating some product implementation.
But I really need to know which one's better, ConnectWise or Autotask.
They both suck.
I will agree with that completely. You need to find every product sucks. You need to find the one that sucks the least for you.
Right. Find the ones that suck the least and that get you to making some money. They're all fine. They're all fine. Go buy one. They're all fine. But then don't worry about it so much, right? Be good at using
Basically,
it. Don't get me wrong. If you're going to buy it, be good at using it, right? Be good at using it. Figure out its bits. I believe all my statements. You're going to use products to minimize risk, to deliver your service better. I totally agree with that. But then don't dwell. Pick and go. You spend way too much time dwelling on that.
And most importantly, like you said, use it well, learn how to use it. And if you can't figure out how to do something with that product because you want to do it a certain way, then one of two things need to happen. One, you need to, ask around, ask tech support, whoever, and make sure you're not missing something. And also ask other MSPs. And then two, consider, should I change the way I'm doing it so that way I can do it a way that works with this tool? And I know it feels like you're letting the tail wag the dog when you do that, but aren't you also letting the tail wag the dog when you say, well, this tool won't do it this certain way, so now I need to change a tool so I can do it the way I need to do it, and give yourself more work because you want to change your tool just so you don't have to change what you do.
Right.
You're changing something. So change the one that causes the least friction.
Yep. Yeah.
Someone here has a question. How
great
can you
question.
trust a company that is driven by profit?
So
we're all driven by profit.
Well, so this is a great question. Okay. So this is about alignment of motivations, right? Full-fledged capitalist. I'm in the business of making money. Do not think that I love talking about regulation. I believe there's opportunity there. I think we should, but do not think that I'm not in the business of making money. I'm totally in the business of making money. What this is about is understanding the motivation and the profit drivers on the other side in order to align with them. It's a great question to be asking. And it's why I delve into strategies of the people that are buying or that are involved with it. I don't fundamentally care who bought who, right? I don't care about that kind of stuff, but I do care about the incentive structures of the owners on the way that they operate. Oftentimes, if one PE company is buying into another PE company, I don't really care. Unless I determine that the kind of investor is motivated by a different thing. The reason I bring up the whole idea of the motivation of the executives at a company like SolarWinds is not because I'm casting them off as bad people or something like that. I'm just observing that their financial motivation is not in doing that, in making you more secure, right? Like that wasn't what they were. That's not what they were in the business of selling. They're in the business of selling as many of their particular products, and their board completely agreed with that. That said, you may find companies that align in different ways or understand the risk you are assuming by the way that they are motivated and thus just mitigate it. So, for example, I really observe that for most of us in the small IT services space, supply chain management is something that we're simply going to have to be aware of and ensure that the companies are doing some level of exposure on the way they are managing that. But it is a risk we are probably not going to be able to offset. But the good news is we're probably not going to have to offset it more than just sort of, the traditional, like we may have to clean up breaches or anything like that. But if SolarWinds is any indication, by the way, our customers were not the targets, even if, and by the way, to be fair, the MSP focused products were in no way involved with the supply chain breach. So let's just be super clear on all of that, right? But what we have to do is we've got to understand the motivations behind that. And by the way, there is an opportunity here for any vendors that are talking about to change their own motivations to drive market adoption. I just will say, I'm working on thinking around this idea, but wouldn't we all buy from a vendor who said, I'm putting up money to guarantee a certain level. If you do these things on implementation and can prove it, I'm gonna cover damage. Like I'll cover it, or I'll have an insurance fund or something like that. Wouldn't that be interesting? I'd buy from them, right? Like, because think about UPSs, right? You buy a uninterruptible power supply that comes with a guarantee. If this thing blows up, we have $200,000 worth of equipment coverage. Huh? It's kind of interesting, you know. And I also look and say, like, I believe in profit. I also believe in building sustainable long-term companies. I'm much more interested in like privately owned, a typical small business kind of company than I am about like pumping private equity and flipping things in three. I don't care about that stuff. I like building companies that are designed to be a machine for creating money in a private enterprise, like in a completely private enterprise. So your job is to, long-winded answer to say, how do you deal with that? You have to just realistically understand their motivations and align with the companies that you can either, that are completely aligned with you, or that you can offset because they've got some advantage that using them, you can then offset the risk if they're not in alignment.
I love that answer. Well, Dave, we've been doing this for just over an hour. Thanks so much for being here today. I love having conversations with you. I don't know why I haven't asked you to come back on sooner.
Oh, anytime. I'm always happy to come on, Steve. Like these are fun. I'll remind everybody, I rant and rave every single day. If you're interested in my rants and raves, please check out the Business of Tech podcast. Free 5 minutes of news and commentary every day. Love having these conversations. I'm available to anybody who wants to. If you want to follow up, you can find me on all the socials. You can find me online. I'm also on YouTube. Like, please reach out. I am independently in the business of thinking about this kind of stuff for IT services companies. It's great fun.
And thank you for doing that. Thanks everyone for watching. I will catch you all at the next episode. Take care.